The best evidence suggests that the kind of bat from which this virus jumped to humans wasn't even present there.
We're looking at exactly where it came from, who it came from, how it happened, separately and also scientifically. So we're going to be able to find it.
And my question is, have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves.
Because we don't know where the novel coronavirus came from yet, the conspiracy theories fill the void.
I'm telling you, the Chi-Coms are trying to weaponize this thing.
Conservative talk show host Rush Limbaugh with zero proof, suggesting a Chinese bioweapon lab is to blame.
Government defenders of gain of function, such as yourself, say that COVID-19 mutations were random and not designed by man. But interestingly, the technique that Dr. Barrick developed forces mutations by serial passage through cell culture that the mutations appear to be natural. In fact, Dr. Barrick named the technique the no-see-em technique because the mutations appear naturally. Nicholas Baker in the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature. Government authorities in the U.S., including yourself, unequivocally deny that COVID-19 could have escaped a lab. Dr. Barrick, an advocate of gain-of-function research, admits the main problem that the Institute of Virology has is the outbreak occurred in close proximity. What are the odds? Barrick responded, could you rule out a laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not.
This morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci is shooting down theories that the coronavirus was man-made. He tells National Geographic everything about the stepwise evolution over time strongly indicates that this virus evolved in nature and then jumped species. Fauci added he does not believe another theory that the virus occurred naturally but was accidentally released into the public from a lab in China, telling Nat Geo that means it was in the wild to begin with. That's why I don't get what they're talking about.
So I wanted to ask, are you still confident that it developed naturally?
No, actually, that's the point that I said. No, I'm not convinced about that. I think that we should continue to investigate what went on in China.
I warned you. I've done it again. I warned you, but did you listen to me? Oh, no, you knew it all, didn't you? Oh, it's just a harmless little bunny, isn't it? Well, it's always the same. I always tell them. Shut up!
What's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Debunked Docket. We are here with our very 4th episode of the Debunked Docket. I'm excited to be here, and I hope that you are excited to be here as well. So, I'm actually very, very excited about this episode because we are debunking the debunkers that tried to debunk something, but in the end, they were actually debunked. I know that may sound a little bit confusing, but it will make sense as this video goes on. So, to start this framework of this debunking, we need to go back to the end of 2019, when the COVID-19 virus was just starting to originate. The first theory of how COVID-19 originated was that it originated in Wuhan, China from a wet market that was selling bats that happened to have the COVID-19 virus on them. There might have been a possibility that one person who may have bought the bat didn't cook it correctly, which led to them getting flu-like symptoms, or the bat just spread the virus as people were walking by. Either way, we know that this virus started to spread throughout the city of Wuhan. This unfortunately led to many people to sadly pass away, and led to millions of people to die around the world, completely destroying people's way of living. Now, that part of the story is absolutely 100% true, and this is all just one theory or one story of a possibility of how COVID-19 originated. And this first theory was widely accepted by everyone. It was accepted by scientists and nurses and politicians and all sorts of people. This was all a 100% fact. It came from a bat at a wet market in Wuhan and then spread throughout the entire world. However, there's another theory that is becoming more and more likely as more and more information starts to come out. This is known as the lab leak theory, which is a very simple concept. Instead of the virus coming from a natural bat that bit a person or a person eating it or someone walking next to it, instead the virus was being studied from a bat in a lab and then was accidentally released into the city. It sounds crazy, but there just so happens to be a laboratory in Wuhan, China that was doing these different experiments. This laboratory was called the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which has been studying coronaviruses in bats for decades. So now what this lab in Wuhan was doing was called gain-of-function research, which are experiments that help scientists understand different viruses. So then we can learn how to fight them better. Learning about a virus can help us make different vaccines and prevent a larger spread of that certain virus. While this can be good research to help protect people, there is still a risk that the virus could get loose and then spread throughout the entire world like we saw COVID-19 do. Now, this lab in Wuhan was also doing some other shady stuff as well, as there was a recent study that came out that showed that COVID-19 was manipulated in some way. As a scientist from Norway and a professor from Great Britain claimed that the likelihood of COVID-19 being a natural process is very small. Some European scientists even believe that the Wuhan scientists tried to cover their tracks as the virus was starting to spread in Wuhan, making it look like the virus was naturally created when they sort of created it on their own. All of this stuff just came out recently, but there was evidence that the laboratory was having issues back when the virus was just getting started, as there was a report that people working in this lab were taken to the hospital in November 2019, a month before China reported the first case of COVID-19. Along with this, according to the Donald Trump State Department, the symptoms of these different scientists lined up with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illnesses. Is there a possibility that they had COVID-19 and were spreading it accidentally across Wuhan? Could there be a possibility that these scientists accidentally leaked COVID? Well, the possibility is still out there, but we need to look at more evidence. As in February, there was a researcher from South China University of Technology that published a paper claiming that the horseshoe bats are known to carry a viral strain that shares 96.2% similarity to the virus that caused COVID-19, and they live 600 miles south of Wuhan, meaning that it would have been a very long flight for one of these bats. However, this could mean that there was a possibility that a person maybe captured the sick bat and then took it over to the Wuhan wet market to sell. However, according to this paper, that's not true, as they interviewed 60 people that lived in or visited Wuhan and that wet market and said that the bat was never a food source in the city and no bats were traded at the market, leading to a more likely conclusion that the bats were trapped and then shipped to the Wuhan lab where they were studied, and where there's a possibility that it was accidentally leaked by the scientists. If you want even more proof of the possibility that the lab leak theory is true, then take a look at this map right here. We can see that the lab where these different coronaviruses in bats were being studied was very close to the Huanan, I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese, seafood market, which was, according to The Guardian, the first place that COVID-19 was detected. So why is it that all of this information is coming out right now? Why is it that we didn't understand this crucial information when the virus actually started? Well, the problem is that all of this was hidden by the Chinese government for a very long time. As we know from the very beginning of this pandemic, China has not been a very trustworthy partner, as they had continued to lie over and over and over again to save their butts from world embarrassment. Let's just take a look back to when the pandemic started again, as we remember that once people started to get treatment for this new sort of flu in November 2019, according to when the scientists first got the virus, China was saying that the virus was not transmittable from person to person, and they continued to tell this lie until January 20th. This lie was so huge, and it was believed by everyone that even the World Health Organization believed it, and tweeted out this lie by saying, preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus. As we know, this was 100% a huge lie, as, well, we have a bunch of people who passed away from COVID-19 because the virus passes from person to person. China was also doing the typical communist thing by censoring people that didn't have the right point of view, as there were many brave doctors that tried to warn the world that COVID-19 was bad, and that we should be prepared for this virus. China decided to censor all of this information and continued to claim that they had it all under control when they didn't. One of these doctors was even summoned by the police and forced him to retract his story. Sadly, this doctor passed away from the disease that he was trying to warn other people about. He was right, and China lied and said he was wrong. Sadly, this communist censorship didn't just stop with doctors, as any Chinese journalist that wrote the wrong opinion about the virus had their work censored. Any average citizen of China that wrote about COVID-19 on social media was silenced. China tried so hard to hide the fact that they had a virus that spread from person to person, that was killing people, and if spread throughout the entire world would kill millions and millions of people. My point for all of this is simple. If China lied about all of this stuff, why would we believe them when they said that there was no possible way that the virus was leaked from a lab? Well, sadly, we as Americans believe China because we as Americans are scared of China for some reason, and apparently no one wants to stand up to them. This fear is very evident as China controls the narrative even in America, as China pressured the NBA to fire the Houston Rockets general manager after he posted a tweet about how Hong Kong should be a free state. They also made sure that John Cena spoke in their native language to apologize for the grave sin of calling Taiwan their own country, which it is. Speaking of Taiwan, if we would have listened to Taiwan instead of China, COVID would be gone right now. As while China was claiming that this virus was not transmittable between person to person, Taiwan warned of the virus being transmittable between people to the World Health Organization. But apparently the World Health Organization ignored them, and instead promoted these Chinese lies. If there's anything that we could learn from this pandemic, it is that we as the American people were all fooled by the Chinese to believe all of these different lies. But it isn't all of our faults, as there are people that need to be blamed for putting all of this Chinese propaganda into our heads. So, who do we blame? Well, the first finger should be pointed at the mainstream media, along with social media, as both of them worked hand in hand to stop the idea that the lab leak theory was real, or even possible. The common reaction from the left was to call the theory a fringe theory that has been repeatedly debunked by experts. As for example, when Tom Cotton came out and said that there was a possibility that the virus was leaked from a lab, the media attacked, as the Atlantic Council wrote an article accusing Cotton of promoting an infodemic, which is just a play on words mixing information and pandemic together. Anyway, the article continues by claiming that Cotton is doing this by pushing the debunked claim that the novel coronavirus may have been created in a Wuhan lab. Another writer, this time from Vox, claimed that the lab leak theory is a dangerous conspiracy theory being advanced by conservatives known to regularly spew nonsense and bash China. This is just the typical media garbage, and they continue to promote this narrative, saying that the lab leak theory was a debunked theory on CNN, MSNBC, and other cable news sites. Here's a video of some of the times that the media did this. They sure look silly now.
There's this question about the Wuhan lab. We know that it's been debunked.
Those same agencies now have been tapped with investigating one of Trump world's most favorite conspiracy theories.
This week, Donald Trump is still pushing the debunked bunkum, despite his own intelligence community's findings that is simply not true.
And there is simply no reason to believe that that is the case. There is no empirical evidence to verify that.
Coming up with a conspiracy theory to try and foment xenophobia with respect to the Chinese has just as much factual support as taking Clorox.
He can't just sit back and let the doctors and the scientists do their jobs. He's got to chime in.
He may pick up the conspiracy theory that this was some weapon.
People don't keep bats in captivity. Complete baloney.
We don't need to invoke conspiracy theories.
This is just another example of the president trying to change the narrative from his own failings.
The problem for President Trump is that he's running for re-election, is looking for ways to deflect blame for the performance of the administration.
Along with this, other politicians were being bashed for their belief that COVID could have come from a lab. People like Rand Paul, who recently wrote on Twitter, "I told you so," which is at least level 25 out of 10 in trolling. Donald Trump was also attacked multiple times for believing this theory, as I always remembered him saying, "Hey, maybe it's from a lab, maybe it's from bats, we aren't 100% sure." He explained that either way it came from China, which is 100% true. Another politician that was dragged through the mud was former CDC Director Robert Redfield, who claimed that he received death threats for believing that COVID-19 accidentally escaped a lab. Redfield said recently in a statement that he expected backlash from politicians, but not from scientists. We have to remember that this man led the CDC. He believed in science. And you can't say that he didn't have any experience on the subject of COVID because he was a virologist, meaning that he studies viruses. The left never took his word because he was against the real science, apparently. All of these people have the same thing in common. They believe something that the media and the narrative didn't believe in. And along with that, they were all on the right, which meant that they were all crazy conspiracy theorists that were spreading lies. It just gets worse as we dive deeper into social media, as if we remember at the very start of the episode, I said that China was censoring people on social media for sharing the wrong information. Well, this was also happening in America as well, as Facebook in February laid out a whole list of different things that they deemed fake or misleading that would be banned or removed from their site. This included the idea that COVID-19 is man-made or manufactured in a lab. It wasn't just Facebook that did this, as Twitter, of course, had their own rules and guidelines when it came to false information. This led to the narrative that anyone that spoke about even the possibility of this theory to be deemed as a conspiracy theorist or a spreader of false information from the media along with social media. All of these people that posted this theory had special little notices put on their Facebook posts or were completely banned from the site, when in the end they were right. And China, the media, and social media were all wrong and were blocking the truth, claiming that the theory was debunked, and now they're the ones that are being debunked by the actual experts. However, there is one man that we cannot ignore. A man that would get on TV every single day to help spread this false information about the lab leak theory, and also other things, even though behind the scenes, he knew exactly what was going on. This, of course, is Anthony Fauci, who I will not call a doctor anymore because I don't think he deserves the title of doctor. If there's one thing that I wish President Trump would have done before he left office, it would be to go down to Dr. Fauci's office, look him straight in the eye, and say, "You're fired." The man is just terrible, that's all I can say. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, why would you be saying all this stuff? Well, this week there was an email drop from Fauci himself. It was not a leak. Fauci dropped them on purpose. And I mean, you thought that the Clinton emails were bad, just buckle up because these are a lot worse. As Fauci in real life said in a White House press briefing in April of 2020 that he denied that there was any way that the virus could come from a lab. However, behind the scenes, Anthony Fauci was getting emails claiming that the opposite was true. As on February 22nd, 2020, Fauci got an email from Dr. Michael Jacobs, which read, "We think that there's a possibility that the virus was released in a lab in Wuhan, the biotech area of China. We also think that the virus might be complexed with another organism, such as yeast or fungus, to make it more sticky. We would like to discuss this with you further. We feel that immediate action must be taken by the United States scientists to try to neutralize this threat." Fauci later forwarded this email to the NIH program officer and said, "Please handle," which is very interesting to say the least. We can see from this email that Dr. Jacobs was trying to warn Fauci that this could be a possibility, and that we needed to take action against either China or the virus to make sure that it doesn't spread elsewhere. However, this never happened, and Fauci continued to promote the lie that there was no way that this virus was created or leaked from a lab. As according to these emails, 2 weeks later, Peter Daszak organized a letter that completely debunked the lab leak theory. So who is this Peter Daszak guy? Well, he just so happens to be the president of EcoHealth Alliance, and was the recipient of $3.7 million to the National Institute of Health for research on bat coronaviruses. $600,000 of that money went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where we believe that COVID-19 was leaked. This man had a professional relationship with the Wuhan Institute, so of course he didn't want the theory to be true, because if it were true, then the lab could have been shut down or scrutinized by the entire world. It seems to me like all of this was just a big cover-up. And if this was a big old cover-up, then this Peter Daszak guy needed to have the most trusted quote-unquote doctor to step up to the plate and publicly debunk this story. As on April 18th, 2020, Daszak sent Fauci an email thanking him for combating the lab leak theory. As he wrote, "I just wanted to say a personal thank you on behalf of our staff and collaborators for publicly standing up and stating that the scientific evidence supports a natural origin for COVID-19 from a bat to human spillover, not a lab release from Wuhan Institute of Virology." He continued by saying, "From my perspective, your comments are brave, and coming from your trusted voice will help dispel the myths being spun around the virus origins." Once again, we are all now finding out that this was all just Chinese propaganda, and it looks like different scientists from behind the scenes were saying not to believe in China. However, for Fauci, instead of listening to these different scientists around him, he decided to listen to a person that was close to the Wuhan lab, leading people to become sick or dying from COVID. And if Fauci would have listened to the other scientists and actually spoke the truth about COVID-19, we could have seen lives saved. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, how on earth would this have saved lives? Well, to do this, I created a little timeline for you, so then it's not all super confusing. This timeline to me would have been what happened if we knew about the lab leak theory at the very beginning and China didn't try and hide different things or lie about different things. So, first off, if we are looking at the facts, we know that in November 2019, scientists started to feel these flu-like symptoms and ended up in the hospital. This would have led scientists and also doctors to be very, very nervous. So these scientists decided to call the governor of Hebei. Sorry, I still don't speak Chinese. And I will not be pronouncing the governor's name because it is also very, very hard. Here, I'll just put him up on the screen here. So the doctors and the scientists tell the governor that there may be a possible lab leak and people are starting to get sick. The governor then goes to the president of China, Xi Jinping, also known as Winnie the Pooh, and in that month, President Xi tells Wuhan and the whole province of Hebei to stay locked down until they have it under control. President Xi then goes to the UN, or the World Health Organization, and says, "Hey, we might have had an accidental lab leak. We are trying to figure it out. We are trying to stop the spread of this new virus." Other countries hearing about this, including the United States, all decide to lock down air travel to and from China, as I believe America and the Trump administration would shut down travel from China in late December. This would have been almost a month before Trump actually stopped travel from China in the real timeline, as he shut down travel from China on January 31st, 2020. Biden probably would have still called it racist and xenophobic, but that's all good. It would have saved many, many lives. Just 1 month could have saved so many American lives. And if other countries followed suit, and China also decided to block off Wuhan from the rest of the world, I believe that COVID-19 wouldn't have been as worse as it is now. Now, there is still a possibility that COVID-19 still could have spread around the world, but we would have known more about it. If COVID-19 was actually leaked from a lab, then scientists would have been testing it, so they would have known how the virus spread. And we also could have created a vaccine a lot faster to stop this virus a lot faster. Along with this, maybe if we listened to other doctors that didn't flip-flop on every single position they ever had in their entire life and were spreading Chinese propaganda, more lives would have been saved. When it comes to COVID-19 and the origin of COVID, there were so many lies and so much deception by so many people that we need to ask the question, how on earth can we ever trust the government again? This story tells us that anything can be true, and if the government says, hey, that's not true, dig a little bit deeper and maybe you could find some truth. It's like after this story, I wouldn't be shocked if the government came out and said, hey, actually the earth is flat. This was just a joke. I actually don't believe in the flat earth theory. You know that I don't. That's stupid. In the end, from all the evidence that we collected in this episode, it looks to me like the lab leak theory is more than just a theory. And as more information starts to come out, it looks more and more like fact. COVID was from bats that were being studied in Wuhan, and it ended up being released into the public on accident. It is important to understand the origin of different viruses, as if we know the origin, we can prevent another virus from happening. Knowing where the virus comes from would help us attack it at the source. And we also need to encourage countries, for the greater good of the entire world, to stand up and to admit if there was an accidental lab leak. This will save lives in the future. However, if these viruses are being leaked, then that just hurts the entire public, and it hurts the entire world, and we cannot let that happen again. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dockery Docket. And until next time, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving, goodbye.